You've probably heard of the Iron Lady, right? Well, long before Margaret Thatcher, there was Golda Meir. She was Israel's first and so far only female prime minister, a real founder of the state. But her story? Oh, it's not just some simple tale of triumph. Not at all. Today, we're going to dig into the really complex legacy of Golda Meir.
And look, she was so much more than just a prime minister. We're talking about someone who literally signed Israel's Declaration of Independence. I mean, a founder in the truest sense of the word. For decades, you really couldn't separate her story from the story of Israel itself. They were just intertwined.
But here's the thing. Her legacy is just completely split down the middle. So how does that happen? How can this revered founding mother also be the leader that so many people blame for what might be Israel's single greatest military disaster? That's the huge contradiction, the paradox we're getting into right now.
All right, first up, from Kyiv to kibbutz. Let's see how this leader was forged.
So let's go back. This is a young Golda Meir, born in Kyiv way back in 1898. And get this, one of her earliest memories, she wrote about this later, was her dad hammering boards over their front door. Why? Because there were rumors of a pogrom coming, a violent, organized mob attack on Jewish families. Can you imagine? That feeling, that deep-seated fear. It never left her. It shaped everything she would become.
Okay, so her family manages to get out, they escape that danger and land in Milwaukee in 1906. But for Golda, the dream of a Jewish homeland was just too strong to ignore. She got really involved in socialist Zionism, and when she decided to marry Morris Meyerson in 1917, she laid down the law. She said, "I'll marry you, but on one condition. We're moving to Palestine. No negotiation." And by 1921, that's exactly where they were, living on a kibbutz, picking almonds, planting trees. I mean, they were literally building a new country with their own two hands.
Okay, on to our next section. This part of her story is amazing. The nation's fundraiser. Basically, the architect of a state.
Okay, I want you to picture this. The year is 1948. The state of Israel is born, and bam, it is immediately plunged into a war for its own survival. They're desperate for money to buy weapons, to just stay afloat. The guy in charge of finances thought, okay, maybe we can raise maybe $8 million from the American Jewish community. But everyone knew that just wasn't going to cut it, not even close.
So who do they send? They send Golda. She goes on these fundraising tours across the US, and she doesn't raise the $8 million they hoped for. No, she raised $90 million. 90! I mean, that's just an absolutely staggering amount of money, and it completely changed the game for Israel in that war.
You know, Israel's very first prime minister, the legendary David Ben-Gurion, he didn't mince words. He said history would remember her as, and I'm quoting here, the Jewish woman who got the money which made the state possible. I mean, think about that. Made the state possible.
So after the war, she settles into a role she absolutely loved. She actually called this period her 7 beautiful years. From 1949 to 1956, she became Israel's Minister of Labor.
And let me tell you, in this job, she was a force of nature, a complete whirlwind. She wasn't just some politician sitting behind a desk. She was a builder, through and through. We're talking massive housing projects for all the new immigrants pouring in, brand new roads, and this is huge. She laid the groundwork for Israel's entire welfare state. Things like Social Security and maternity benefits, that was her.
All this success, all this nation building, it didn't go unnoticed. It basically launched her onto the world stage. For a solid decade, from 56 to 66, she was Israel's foreign minister. She became one of the most famous women in politics anywhere, meeting with world leaders like, JFK.
All right, now the story takes a turn. Section 3, the Surprise War, an event that would push Israel right to the edge.
So, in the days just before October 1973, there were signs. You had Syrian forces massing up on the Golan Heights. Things looked tense. But the official consensus, the thinking inside Israeli intelligence, was, they're not ready to attack. They were confident they'd get plenty of warning if something was really about to happen. They were dead wrong. So now it's the morning of the attack, and Golda Meir is facing an impossible choice. On one hand, her legendary defense minister, Moshe Dayan, is telling her a full-scale war probably isn't going to happen. On the other hand, her top general, David Eleazar, is practically screaming at her to mobilize the entire army and launch a preemptive strike. I mean, what do you do? She's getting 2 totally opposite recommendations from her most trusted advisors. So she makes a call, a split-second decision that people would argue about for the next 50 years. She says, okay, mobilize the army.
Full mobilization. She agreed with the general on that. But, and this is the crucial part, she said no to a preemptive strike. Now why? Why would she do that? She was terrified that if Israel fired the first shot, the world would label them the aggressor. And if that happened, they could lose everything, especially that critical lifeline of military aid from the United States. Without that, they were done.
Which brings us to our final section, an unsettled legacy, saint or sinner. It's complicated.
After the war, the public anger was just immense. People were furious. Now, an official investigation later cleared her of direct responsibility. It even praised her for mobilizing the reserves when she did. But you know what? It didn't matter. The political damage was done. In the court of public opinion, she was guilty. Her government fell apart, and in 1974, she resigned.
And the criticism of her legacy goes way beyond just the war. Back in a 1969 interview, she said something that has followed her ever since. She said, "There was no such thing as Palestinians." I'll repeat that. They did not exist. Now, for her critics, this quote is Exhibit A. It's seen as the most damning evidence of a total failure to understand or even acknowledge the Palestinian people and their history in the land.
So this is what we're left with. Two totally conflicting views of the same person. On one side, you have the revered founder, the Iron Lady, who got the money, built the houses, and really guided Israel through its early years. And on the other, you have this tragic figure, a leader whose stubbornness and blind spots, many argue, led the country straight into a national trauma.
I mean, what a life, from that little girl terrified of pogroms to a powerful global leader. But in the end, it seems like that same iron will, the thing that was forged in all that early hardship, was both her greatest asset and her greatest liability. It built a nation, but it also might have been what led it to the brink of collapse. And that leaves us with the big question, right? How should history remember a leader whose greatest strength, that unbending iron will, was also arguably the source of her most catastrophic failure? There's no easy answer here. The truth, just like the woman herself, is incredibly complex.